And so that for me really kind of became my calling, is to go, hey, I want to ensure, and I didn't even know if I wanted to be a pastor or what that looked like, but I want to ensure that if I'm ever a part of church leadership in any way, that no one will experience what I experienced in that moment, either bringing their friend or as a guest who's coming in for the first time.
Welcome to the Everywhere Podcast, a collection of interviews with leaders and pastors and everyday followers of Jesus who are living into the reality that Jesus changes everything, everywhere. Hey, I'm Pastor Ryan Welshans. On this episode, we take time to talk with Pastor Kevin Jack. Kevin Jack is senior pastor of Highland Park Church in Lakeland, Florida, my hometown. And before that, he was senior pastor at Be Hope Church in Beaver Creek, Ohio. And prior to that, he church planted in Kentucky, a church called Crosspoint. I think you're really going to love this conversation. Kevin Jack is really engaging, high energy, fantastic leader, and a great guy with great stories. Also, if you've never listened to his podcast, Leading Hope, it is a fantastic podcast that he does with his coworker and friend, VJ Williams. You can find that on any podcast platform, and I would highly recommend that you check it out. With that said, let's dive into our conversation with Kevin Jack. Well, good morning, Pastor Kevin Jack. How are you, sir?
I'm good, man. How are you, Ryan?
I'm doing well. Before we even dive into hard questions, I think the hardest one and the deepest question I could ask you is, what is it like being a Floridian now for a couple of months?
It is. So I told my wife this morning, I was like, I feel like I'm in Groundhog Day, because every day I wake up, it's 92 with a 20% chance of rain. It's just like, I'm so used to like Ohio weather, checking what I'm wearing, checking stuff like that. I was like, I don't need to check the weather ever. It's the same.
Right. Yeah, I transitioned up here to the Midwest a year and a couple of months ago, but I grew up in Lakeland, Florida for 30 years. Yeah, I grew up, I went to Lake Gibson High School, and I was associate pastor at Lake Gibson Church of the Nazarene.
That's awesome.
Lakeland. Yeah, my wife and I grew up in Lakeland, so it's a great town, and the weather up here is crazy.
Yeah, yep.
It's a bit nuts, but all right. Well, so let's start off with your call to ministry. What's your story?
Okay, so my calling is, I always laughed that I felt like everyone's calling story was like, God pursued and I ran, and then I finally relented.
Right.
And I heard so many of those growing up. I just kind of thought of to go, do I have to run? Like, do I? And I even thought to the spot of like, do I have to like have a moment, or can I just get in? And I always went back to the passage of Isaiah of the "Here I am, Lord, send me," and to go, is he looking for volunteers? Like, do I have to be like drafted? Could I just go, hey, I want to do this?
Right.
So that was like part of it. Is my mom was a children's pastor growing up, so I always had an appetite, a desire. I kind of always had an inside look at ministry and wanted to be a part of that. But then one of the key moments of my life is I was in high school, had a best friend who was asking questions about God. So I did what I thought I was supposed to do. I brought him to church, and he was Sunday morning, brought him there. He was bored out of his mind. And it's just like, you feel all those things that you never realized of to go, why do we do these things? Like, this is awkward. This is weird. What are all these pieces that you never really realized? Because, man, I loved my church and I loved everything that we did. Right. And then you got your best friend sitting next to you who doesn't know Jesus. And it was just like, oh, this is awful. And so he left, bored, never wanted to come back. And I felt like in that moment, like my church had failed me, because I thought, I brought him here. And I know there's more, like I didn't have an understanding of missional and attractional and all those other things. But I thought at the very least, I needed my church on a Sunday morning to speak a language that my friend understood and give him an encounter that was meaningful to him. And it didn't. And so that for me really kind of became my calling, is to go, hey, I want to ensure, and I didn't even know if I wanted to be a pastor or what that looked like, but I want to ensure that if I'm ever a part of church leadership in any way, that no one will experience what I experienced in that moment, either bringing their friend or as a guest who's coming in for the first time.
Wow, that's good. That's good. And so you eventually went off to, I think, Mount Vernon, right?
Yeah.
And on to seminary and everything. Talk a little bit about that journey towards knowing eventually the call to actual vocational ministry and all that. What led you to I think you're a youth pastor first, right?
Yeah. So went to Mount Vernon, was there for 4 years. Didn't go to seminary. I actually got a degree from Trinity Seminary online in what was it? It was Master of Arts in Christian Management and Leadership. Fun note, this is going to make me look bad, is it's not accredited. And I knew it because it was all I could afford. I was just like, I want to keep learning. I want to get this. And people are like, don't do that. It's not accredited. And I was like, yeah, but at least I'm like getting a reading list and all this other stuff.
Right.
I don't care. I was on a youth pastor salary. I could afford nothing. So was a youth pastor for 3.5 years in Maysville, Kentucky. Crazy circumstances led us to planting a church. Out of that, I can tell a condensed version in like 2 minutes.
Whatever version you want to tell, that's the most interesting. We got time.
So the condensed version is I functionally split a church. So that is, people go like, oh, you planted. I was like, no, I split. Like, I'm willing to own it. Like, I split a church. And I know you're not supposed to do that, and it's really bad. But how it came about was, so longtime pastor, left quickly, abruptly. There were some moral issues going on there. I was the interim pastor for 6 months. It was the Maysville Church of the Nazarene. We were running about 250 people at the time. Mm-hmm. I'm 24, so I have no business leading a church that size. I did everything you're not supposed to do in an interim because I didn't know any better. I changed everything I could in 6 months. Wow. We lost about 50 people. We gained about 50 people. So we came out pretty net neutral. And so at the end of the 6 months, the board voted 11-4 to put my name before the congregation. And then Nazarene Church congregational vote, you need a super majority, 66%. I always laugh, pastors go, what's your real number? Because no one's going at 66%. They're like, is it 80? Is it 90? Is it 95? Like, what's your real number? And the vote came back at 59%. So I laugh and I go, some people wonder if people like them. I am one of the few people who has a statistical representation of how many people did not like them. And to say, this is a piece of me. This kills me. I am at that church for 3.5 years. Those last 6 months, I was the youth pastor, the interim pastor. Like, I still had all our youth ministry. I did almost all the preaching, hospital calls, pastoral visits. And still 41% of the people in the church went, nope, no interest. So after that happened, there were some really good people in that church. There was also some real toxicity. Like, I remember at a board meeting when I was the youth pastor, they brought up the covenant of Christian conduct and should we or should we not greet guests at the door with our covenant of Christian conduct. That way they know if they want to be a part of the church or not. Yeah, like some stuff like that. Just some real legalism there to say, hey, if you think in any way that drinking's okay, then we don't want you to begin with. Wow. So at the end of the vote, I had 10 of the 15 board members come to me separately, say, hey, we're done. Like, we're not mad. We're not upset. We see the path that this church has chosen, and we don't want to be a part of it. We're going to go somewhere else anyway. We'd much rather you start a church, which in my head, I'm going, that's church split. Like, you don't do that. That's a bad thing. But then the other thought is, this is actually enough votes in the board to sanction this, which is my church leadership. So I went to the DS and had some long conversations on it, and he blessed it and said, you're good to go. So I split a church with the blessing of the church board and the district superintendent.
What else do you need?
There you go.
What else do you need? All right.
Yep.
And so then that turned into, that was Crosspoint, right?
Yeah. So that was Crosspoint, and we were there for about 6 years and had a blast.
Talk a little bit about what you saw God do in the midst of a church plant experience. But you had never done that before, but man, it must have been an exciting time.
Oh my goodness. So we were basically, I mean, honestly, we were an overgrown youth group
Mm.
that all of a sudden had felt like we'd been under this like heavy burden of legalism.
Mm-hmm.
That, to be honest with you, our immaturity just kind of ran rampant those first 2 years. And I laugh as to go, we were a newborn and a toddler in the truest sense of the word.
Wow.
That there was some stuff that we were just doing because we could do it. Like, I can remember on our 1 year anniversary, we invited the marching band in, and they marched through the middle of our worship service. Now, I want to be clear, like, some of the stuff we did was kind of cool.
That's actually really cool. Yeah, I like that idea.
Yeah, but I look back on some of the other stuff, and it's just like, oh, we were just doing that because we knew no one was going to tell us no at this point in time, and we could run with it.
Yeah.
But just like truly incredible things of seeing people come to faith, seeing people who had written church off for years come to church for the first time. After about 4 years, we were just exhausted with the setup and tear down and mobile church. We were in 3 different temporary buildings, set up, tear down. The last one that we were in, the sanctuary could only seat 150 people. So we were running 4 services for a period of time. And it's just like, whew, it was a lot when you're setting up and tearing down and going through 4 services. So eventually purchased what was an old flea market, and we doubled in a year under that. So we started with about 65 people. And when I was able to leave, we were averaging about 550 in attendance.
Wow.
And it was just a blast.
And so then what led you to Beaver Creek Nazarene that eventually became Be Hope? Talk a little bit about the journey there and then the transition from Beaver Creek to Be Hope and what you saw God do.
Oh, okay. So leaving Crosspoint was, it's a really strange thing. And I didn't have language for it then. I do now. My last Easter there, I still remember, like, we had 972 people in worship. Maysville is a town of 7,000 people. So it was like this moment of to go, we have over 10% of our town is here in church with us.
That's incredible. Wow.
And I got up the next week, and it's the strangest thing. And I don't know, I get really cautious because I know so many people who talk about God's design or something like that, or hearing a voice. And I've got a little bit of that comes later. And I think sometimes it is easy for us to we so overemphasize mental health counseling awareness. Hear me as like, we should have that in place, please. But that we now actually discount hearing from God.
That's good.
Okay. I got up there the Sunday after Easter, and I just knew it wasn't mine to lead.
Wow.
I didn't hear a voice. There was no sign, but I just looked out, and it was just the sense of to go, you're not my people to lead anymore. I know it's someone else's. And I had pastor friends really tell me in that to go, are you sure you're not depressed? Are you sure it's not just the post-Easter dip that you're really struggling with? It's to go, no, like, I'm thrilled. It's just not mine anymore. And so I had received a couple calls over the years, not a ton, but like, honestly, like 2-3 weeks after that, I got a call from Beaver Creek Church of the Nazarene, and was just like, hey, I feel like this is the one. So we just kind of walked through that door, and it kept opening. And so then to fast forward to go, then got to Beaver Creek Church of the Nazarene. This is December of 2016. Fun story. So my first Sunday there is the Sunday before Christmas Eve. So church Sunday, Christmas Eve is on Saturday. I obviously have nothing to do with the planning of any of these services.
Yeah.
Okay. Just because you're getting there, it's already all in motion. I got my first angry email on Saturday night of someone who was completely disappointed with our Christmas Eve services. And that, for me, that was like, I had just gone 5.5 years in a church plant where no one's going because their grandma was there. Everybody's there because they want to be there. And I'm like, I've been here for 6 days, and people are already emailing me with how unhappy they are and want to schedule follow-up meetings. So I was like, oh shoot, what did I get into? Oh man. But slowly, man, I can't even remember all those things in the early days. Slowly started creating culture, designing strategy,
Mhm.
clarifying vision. And we were at what became Be Hope Church for about 5.5 years.
Wow. I have loved watching. I kind of go back and look at the Beaver Creek Nazarene days on the YouTube channel and stuff, and
Yep.
watching the progression and the growth and the, I guess I just call it the focus of the church.
Yeah.
I love watching. Do you feel like there were some major shifts that happened in you as a leader while you were there that you can kind of go, boy, that was a milestone. Boy, that was a milestone.
Oh man, yeah. So let me give the most important one that transformed with me internally
Mhm.
is I realized, and I never would have clarified it like this, that I had truly begun to doubt and discount the power of God.
Mm.
And I look back at like the sermons that I preach at Crosspoint, and I would talk in the schools a lot, like do assemblies, things like that.
Right.
And I could just take the scripture out of my message for Sunday and preach the exact same message
Mm. Wow.
because there was no power of the gospel in that. And I kind of realized what had happened over time is partially in my desire for it to be accessible to the outsider. But then also this is three of the pastors who I have interned or served under are all out of ministry because of moral failure. And I just say as a joke, like at a certain point in time, you start to go, okay, what's the common denominator? Like, is it me? I don't feel like I have anything to do with their marriages, but like,
Right.
do I have any part I'm playing in this whatsoever?
Right.
So just as that happened, I realized what happened is that when the person who proclaims the power of God shows that they're not actually following God, it's really easy for you to just sacrifice that and discount it without realizing it.
Mm.
So then whenever I got to Beaver Creek, I'm a very like practical thinker. I'm a very functional person. So I started doing all those pieces. And then you mentioned before we were on the call, the guy who I co-host podcasts with, VJ.
Yeah.
I encountered VJ, and VJ changed the trajectory of my life because VJ has a story of being like lost, radically encountering God and becoming a completely different person.
Wow.
And as I started to get to know him and started to do other stuff, I thought, I actually don't have a category in my theology for this because everything in my life has been so emphasized on the process of growth and the practices we need to engage in. I don't have that Saul on the road to Damascus moment that I'm really looking for. And so what really began to shift in me as a leader was honestly just the belief, not just that churches can grow and become essential to their community, but really this belief that like God wants to do this. God wants to be engaged and involved, and for us to tell stories and give testimony to the power of God at work. So I honestly look at the different things to say, like, at Crosspoint, I feel like I was a good leader, but I was really a functional leader.
Sure.
Over that time at Be Hope, I really became more of a visionary leader because I started to really search and see what I felt like God was calling us to do.
Talk a little bit about teamwork and leadership and all that you experienced.
Yeah. So I would actually say like, so the two sets of skills that I've developed, I developed speaking skills, teaching children's church under my mom.
Wow, cool.
I know this sounds great, but like to go, you learn how to keep the room engaged.
Yeah.
And it's not about just the quality of the content. You learn about how to adapt on the fly. Because like kids, my goodness, if you get up there and just read a script, like you better be looking them in the eyes and adapting as you go to keep them there. And so to go, I developed that there. In terms of leadership and developing team, I really developed that at Crosspoint because early on, I mean, I think it was 4 years in until we had 3 staff members.
Wow.
And so all of when we started that first 18 months, it was me and a team of volunteer leaders. And so you really have to learn how to keep people engaged, how to create buy-in, how to create ownership, because they all could have done other things with their time. And so to say, like, if I wasn't actively in every decision making, like obsessed with creating ownership of those things,
Mhm.
they wouldn't have been with me for long. And so then you then carry those same behaviors through to a staff model.
Mhm.
And now you have people that are paid. And so it's easy to go, well, you're paid, so you just have to go do this. And to go, no, I learned how to engage people at every level of decision making in order that even if they didn't have, we use this phrase at Be Hope, we said, you don't always get a vote, but you always have a voice.
That's good.
Like, you don't always get to decide the direction that we're going, but you do need to know you get to contribute to it, and you can sway it if it's the best idea that wins. And so I would just say, like, man, learning how to lead through volunteers creates the skill set that then helps a participative leader create truly great teams.
Talk about the nature of trust in
Oh yeah.
teamwork when things are like especially like when COVID hit, right? And
Yeah.
not knowing how to walk through some of that stuff.
Yeah. So we started one of my favorite books that I actually just took our staff through here at Highland Park is Five Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni.
Okay, yeah.
And it is just it's phenomenal as a read to help yourself identify with it. But then the other piece really becomes creating a high conflict culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say it as like, there's always conflict. I want the conflict to live above the surface instead of in the post-meeting conversations in the back rooms and the internal feelings.
Right.
I just want it to be right out there in the open. And so part of that was developing that. I've just kind of found my greatest. So when I served as the interim pastor at Maysville, I made the decisions that I felt needed to be made. But the other thing that I tried to do is I tried to fit the mold.
Yeah.
And I hated myself for that. And that was exhausting. Right. And I don't ever want to do that again.
Wow.
And so I have found that it is just much easier for me just to be overtly blunt. And so I tell our board this here at Highland Park. I told the board at Be Hope this all the time, is to say, listen, like, I'm not holding my cards close to my vest. I'm just going to lay my hand out before you and let you know exactly what I'm thinking and where I'm headed. And so I just think that posture is to go, when I've done that, it creates a real sense of transparency. If I could give you like a funny thing, we recently switched service times at Highland Park, which I don't know if that's a good idea. Like, I've been here 5 weeks and we changed service times. And the problem was 80% of the kids went to the second service. And so our service times were 9 and 10:30. So we switched them to 9:15 and 11. And so I got up before the church and I said, hey, let me tell you why we're doing this. We're trying to create a more even split because we're creating chaos in our kids' ministry. And so I want to make that first time a little more appealing, so some of you will come to it. I want to make that second time a little less appealing. And the whole church just busted out laughing. And I was like, oh, I actually didn't mean that as a joke. I want you to know this is exactly what I'm doing. But I just really think helping people see, first off, to go, hey, we're gonna just be honest with each other, and we're gonna handle it in a way that it addresses issues and not people, that it's about ideas and not feelings. And then to just carry myself in such a way that just goes, I'm gonna be never mean, never rude, but I'm gonna be completely open. And what is helpful in terms of where I'm thinking and where I'm headed has really helped create that trust.
Wow. In terms of kind of your weekly rhythms then and things that you do as a leader, kind of walk us through your week a little bit. What's it look like?
Yeah, so I'm actually kind of dying on the vine right now because I don't have rhythms yet.
Right.
But the rhythms that we're going to be establishing. So first off, I really love large amounts of open space in my schedule.
Sure.
So to go, I am It just kills me when I have a meeting every other hour.
Right.
Because it takes me too long to get back in the flow. So rhythms that I like is what I'm going to be heading towards is Monday for me is going to be writing day. So writing message. Tuesday, I'm going to be focused more on kind of leadership. So that's going to be a whole bunch of staff meetings, a whole bunch of design things, reviewing metrics. So I want to stack my calendar. I know some people don't like this. They want to create these like pockets between meetings. Give me 15 minutes to reset, to rethink. That's just not my personality. I just want to run from one thing to the next. And some people, they've got this great skill that they're more of a slow processor, meaning they digest it, they think about it, and they'll come out with something brilliant. If I'm having a good idea, it's going to happen right now. It does not help me at all to sit and think about it. It won't be any better. I just know that. Wow. So Tuesday for me, I just run meetings the whole way through. Wednesday gives me kind of an open pocket of a leadership day. If there's people I need to meet with, if there's projects I need to take. Somebody years ago, they used this phrase, be a maker in the morning and a manager in the afternoon. So I found I do my best creative work in the morning. So I want to kind of protect that time. In the afternoon, if there's counseling, I'm not a good counselor, so I try not to do many of those. I just tell people to quit doing what they shouldn't be doing. And I'm actually really serious. I'm a bad counselor. But if there's those meetings, I hit them in the afternoon. And then Thursday's kind of just like, hey, prep for the weekend, going through all that. I'm a morning person. So I've got a crew that plays basketball twice a week at 6 a.m., which is fantastic. I'm usually up 5:30, 6, reading, devotions, workout, all that kind of stuff. And then I don't feel, this is interesting, like the Be Hope staff, they left a little earlier in the day. Highland Park staff, there's a lot of them that are here till 5 or 5:30. Some people pride that, and that's great. I honestly want to be done around 4. So if that means I start at 6 a.m., that's fine with me. But I want to get home. I want to play with my kids. I want to hang out. To a fault, my wife is the most extroverted person I know. I am not nearly as extroverted. So we kind of have to go through some careful scheduling and go like, hey, I'll hang out with this people at this time and these other people at this time. Like if I'm hanging out with you Sunday night, you got to be a really good friend because I'm pretty much done with humanity when Sunday night rolls around.
That's great. Thanks for that. I noticed a shift in your sermon delivery.
Oh yeah.
Talk about that shift and that growth in your sermon delivery, but also we can get to this in a few minutes, but sermon preparation and, I imagine they all kind of mold together. So
cool. Well, I mean, as I go through this, pause me if something doesn't make sense.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So part of this is my own spiritual transformation. BJ's story, realizing the power of God.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, I began to realize that my teaching method did not have room in it for radical calls to repentance and transformation of life. It was far more information focused.
Okay.
I add to that 2 other things. One of them being that I realized that the primary reason why people don't act is not because of a lack of information. It's because they haven't cultivated emotion. Mm-hmm. Like no one in the history of the world has ever gone like, hey, if you want to be healthier, exercise more and eat healthier. No one's been like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. It's just like, we just don't care. And I don't care either. And so I looked at my own life and I went, oh, the things that I'm not doing, it's because the emotion isn't there. Now I had to work through some baggage because, man, I was told for years that like churches were not meant to be emotionally manipulative. And that became anything that was emotional was emotionally manipulative. And I believe wholeheartedly churches can be emotionally manipulative when we're doing oh, come on, I know there's one more on this altar call. I'm not satisfied yet. Like, not a fan of that. But then the other side of it is to discount emotions is to discount part of who God created us to be. And so we look at it for the fact we go, God has emotions. Like it says that God gets angry. It says that God has zeal. And every time God carries out his will, it says the zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. And so I really view it as like, if we're going to love God with not just our mind, but our heart and our soul, emotion has to be a part of it. So personal transformation, realization of the role of emotions personally and in scripture. And then the other side of it is, as our online platform kept growing, I had this thought to go, I love what happens online, but I also believe there's something special that takes place in the room. And I realized when I was watching different preachers, I went, there's some people that I would rather watch online because they're better. Like I'm in like comfort of my home. My experience is better watching you through a screen. There's other people that I want to be in the room because I feel like something is taking place in the room that I'm missing. And so I said, I need my style to adapt to cultivating emotion, not just emotion, but to understand emotion has a role to play. The power of God and wanting people to want to be in the room. Yeah. So I really began to shift from a teaching model to a preaching model. Now, at first, I had no idea what I was doing. And so I just started yelling because I was like, I don't even know what this is, but I'm excited about it. So then I used COVID. This is, if I could go, I wish I had pictures of the room. I diagrammed hundreds of messages. I just took message after message because I really didn't know how to preach. I only knew how to teach. And I like color coded it. Every illustration was in blue. Every scripture reference was in orange. Every time they were kind of setting the stage, I put it in red. Pieces of proclamation, I put it in purple. And I just diagrammed it. And I put every single one up on the wall.
Wow.
And after I had lots of these, I started to see a pattern. And so this kind of became that, like, there's some like subtle distinctions between teaching and preaching. I hope this is helpful, like to say like teaching is point focused. Mm-hmm. You have a phrase or a paragraph that can summarize the message. Preaching has an idea or a mantra at the core of it. Mm-hmm. It's succinct, it's small, and everybody may have a slightly different meaning of what that is for them. I really believe that gives the Holy Spirit room to act, to convict, and to compel where someone is. So to say, like, I don't want to preach a point. I want to have an idea that everything flows from.
Nice.
And so that was one of the biggest things. The other side of it is, this is the part where it just gets more fun, is teaching. Like, you kind of work through an order. It really doesn't matter what's going on in the room. You could just work through the same order. Just to say, like, I shifted back a little bit to a teaching model at the start of COVID when I was talking to a screen. It was like, doesn't matter, like talking to a screen. Preaching becomes radically different based upon where the room is and responsive to the room itself. Sure. And so there's a give and take. There's an engagement that you can only take people as far as they're really wanting and willing to go, who are with you. But then a lot of it has to do with the order. And so in preaching, you have runs. Sorry, this is all my language. I had to create terminology around it because I didn't understand. And so like a basic teaching model goes, this is kind of Andy Stanley's stuff. Okay. He says, me, we, God, you, we. Right. I just abbreviated it to intro, tension, content, application, landing. And you run through that. If you're going to preach, you can't do that just once in 40 minutes or 30 minutes. It doesn't work. Right. And so I realized that where teaching really dips into the tension of life, preaching focuses on the promises of God and the life that we want to be a part of. It doesn't just go, you got a problem. Let me tell you, you really have a problem. Here's how you solve it. And so it starts with you kind of feeling bad. You're like, oh, shoot, I do have a problem. Where preaching kind of creates an aspiration of to go, here's the life that you were created to live. And you're going, oh, I want that. Yeah. Like I do. I want to be a part of that. So the energy is different. There's still conviction, but the energy becomes more aspirational than realizing that you're a failure. And so kind of how a run works is there's kind of 4 parts to it. Is the first part for me is I just refer to as truth. This is the promise of God. This is the good news. It's something that is above the surface of where I currently am that I am desiring towards. My second section, I just call it contrast. I want to separate that from how I currently live. I want to show that this is better in some way from the life that I'm currently involved in. And so to say, like, I know to move on from the first section when people are, okay, when they really start nodding is when I move past the second section.
Okay.
Because now they're going, ooh, they'll kind of lean in. And it's kind of funny because we have the same response to the same thing, even if it's different content. People kind of lean in a little bit because they're going, ooh, I do want that. The third section I call supremacy. And this is where your key statements come in. So where I blew it early on is I tried to start with the key statements, like the ones that people write down or tweet, or those like inverted statements of like, he who fails to plan plans to fail. Like, obviously I'm not preaching that, but that's just an example of that. Yeah. Is to say that needs to come later once they already want it. When I put it at the beginning, I'd like say a key statement and people go, oh, you don't get what this is or why it matters.
Right.
And then the fourth part is I call it proclamation, but it becomes really focused on identity. And I kind of picked this up from James Clear. So he wrote this book, Atomic Habits. Yeah. And in the book Atomic Habits, oh, it's so good.
It's a great book.
He talks through how like habits and behaviors become easiest when they're attached to our identity. Mm-hmm. And so don't say, I want to start working out. Say, I'm an athlete, and as an athlete, I work out. When our behavior and habits becomes attached to the identity that we already believe about ourselves, then it's far easier to follow through. And so that's that fourth section, is I'm proclaiming the person that you already are. And so what I want is I want people walking out of the room thinking, I already am this, which I wholeheartedly theologically believe they are.
Yeah.
And now it's time for me to actually do the things that live into it. And so that's kind of some messages will have 2 runs, some will have 4. They take anywhere between like 5 and 12 minutes, but it's really understanding it's not intro, tension, content, application, landing. It's truth, contrast, supremacy, proclamation gives it the edge that makes it more aspirational than dealing with problems.
Thanks for walking through that. That's really, so how long do you think you prep on a sermon? What's your sermon preparation look like?
Okay, so sermon preparation for me is I want to, part of this comes in line with the team, mm-hmm. is I want to give them enough time to prep creative and stuff like that. So I kind of say it as, this is what I've adapted to over the years. So I'm not fully doing this well. Is what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to 2 months out, give my team the idea.
Okay.
Just to say, it's about this. So an example was, did a message recently on Saul's transformation on the road to Damascus. And the part that stuck out to me is that when God came to Ananias and said, you're going to go to Saul, Ananias goes to Saul, who is a known terrorist of the way. Mm-hmm. And his first words to him were, brother Saul. Mm. So like, and that was just like blew me away, because I'm going like, all he had was God's word to trust in that moment. He didn't take any, like, we don't know, like, not taking a security guard, anything else like that. And he comes in and he gives him this just open arms, familial greeting. And so I come before the team and I said, I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the fact that Ananias isn't suspicious. He's fully welcoming, that he says, brother. That's all I give him, because that's all I know at that point in time.
Sure.
So I kind of have that in my head. I have an Evernote note for it. So it's with me on every device. And just when I know those are there, over the next 2 months, as thoughts come in, I just make a quick note of it. So I'm kind of always adding content for 2 months at a time to these different things. I have a message I'm preaching on generosity 2 months from now. Mm-hmm. And I just heard a thing the other day to say that everyone tithes. To say everyone tithes to something.
Yeah.
The question is, what is your first 10% actually going towards?
Ooh, that's
great. It was a Matt Chandler message, to give credit where credit's due. I was like, that's awesome. I'm going to use that. And then Monday of that week is I just take that idea and all the different things, And key part of kind of my message preparation process is I use commentaries to check that I'm accurate, not to fill the content of the message.
Oh, that's good. Okay.
I like you can see like right there, like I got a lot.
Yeah.
But I think so often like commentaries are written for academics. And the tendency is then whenever we build our message out of commentaries, we build it over intellectualized for the person, and we miss the human element that is taking place within the scripture narrative.
Yeah.
And so to go like the commentary doesn't deal with how the woman at the well was feeling. The commentary doesn't deal with the fear of Ananias going to Saul, and to go, I think that's the far more significant thing taking place and where we truly find ourselves in the story. So I do a bunch of writing, a bunch of thoughts, a bunch of prep, and then I'll pull commentaries in real late to go, let me make sure I'm not a heretic. Let me make sure I'm okay. And then at the very end, I draw it. So,
really?
Yeah, let me give you a... So why I do this is this enables me, first off, it helps me understand things conceptually a lot better. So here is my message for this week and kind of what it looks like.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And I still use the whole color code that I started of like green's a key point, purple's proclamation. For me, yellow is when I'm coming to the surface, blue is an illustration, orange is scripture. But what that helps me to do is if I, so say it like this, Ryan, is if you were given a document and you read that document and then someone said, you got 5 minutes, duplicate the document. You get some of it right.
Sure.
But you miss a whole lot.
Yeah.
If someone had a picture and they said, hey, look at this picture for 5 minutes. Now duplicate this picture. You can get it pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
And this has nothing to do with being a visual learner or anything like that. It's the way our memories are wired. So when I'm going through this, to say it as like, if I'm up there on the platform and I forget a point, I know where it is on the page. And so I can go, hey, this key thing right here, I had 3 arrows coming that. That one is kind of in the middle of the top right. Oh, that's what it is. And so by drawing that, it helps me understand the flow of the message a lot easier than just outlining it.
Wow. And we'll, for those listening to this, there's a video version, and also those listening, we'll put a still picture of that up on the show notes. That's just awesome. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that.
So one of the funny things is like some people ask me, I don't get a bunch of people asking me, just to be clear. I don't want to make it sound like that. But every once in a while I say like, hey, can I get a copy of that message or an outline or your manuscript? And I'm like, whatever I give you would be completely useless to you because it only makes sense to me.
That's good. That's good. I've heard you talk before about as a church and as a team, and I would imagine in this transition even to Highland Park, helping the church understand things that are worthy to celebrate, that we as a staff and as a church, these are the things we're going to lift up that can help really shape the narrative and the culture of the church. It's a baptism, salvations, big side testimonies. I was thinking the other day about what are some things that you think churches celebrate that actually hold them back from moving forward?
Oh my word.
I feel like we all celebrate things, right?
I think when we, and I'm going to tread on some shaky ground.
Sure.
I think there is a tendency to celebrate faithfulness as merely like I showed up over and over again. And when we celebrate that sense of longevity without growth, without risk, I think we create a culture of consumers.
No, yeah.
And it's easy because like as a pastor, you love the people who are always going to be there. One of the things I have to force myself to tell my team, is, and I don't want to say it, but I have to force myself to say it, is I say, I don't want you to be loyal to me. I want you to be loyal to the call of God on your life and the mission he wants you to engage in. Yeah. And it's just easy in church world to go like, hey, we've all been here for this long. Thank you, faithful saints. And to go, but where's the risk? Where's the steps of faith that you're taking? Because if it's just the same thing over and over again, that is, yes, you are in, by one definition, faithful, but that is not actually faith lived out, because faith calls us to step out.
Wow. That's good. That's good.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest one that I would point to, would be that factor. That's a great question of what are the things that we celebrate that actually hold us back.
So transitioning real quick, resurrecting or reconstructing the rubble. I just dived through it again yesterday, read it again. Super great book.
Oh, thank you.
Like, I imagine you've heard great testimonies that have come out of that book and what it's done in people's lives.
Yeah, I have, which has been awesome.
Yeah. What stirred you to want to actually just sit down and write something?
Yeah. I never really wanted to write a book. I'm more of a speaker than a writer. Mm-hmm. And that's a different animal. My kind of like postlude on that is to go, I didn't realize sometimes like I would throw a message to a staff member and have them take a Sunday, and they would come to me like on Thursday before the Sunday, and they say, yeah, I think I have the outline about and done. I'd be like, you have no idea how hard you have to work to get this right. Just you're not used to it. You have to go over it over and over and over again. That's what I did with the book. I did not realize how hard I had to work to make it good.
Wow.
And so it's kind of like the reason why I wrote it is because I actually felt like this was content that was better delivered through the medium of a book. And I started watching all these people fall away from faith. So most of them personal friends, people who I had known from youth groups, stuff like that. Some of them more publicly and in the news. Mm-hmm. And they spoke about faith as if it was lost and they had no idea how. Kind of like so if somebody goes, I lost my keys, we don't just shrug our shoulders. We ask the stupid question, well, where did you last have them?
Right. That's good.
And so we trace our steps back. And when I heard story after story, I just started to notice patterns and to go, hey, there's some common things that are happening here of all these people who are losing faith, and they're acting like they have no idea how they landed in the spot they are. Because honestly, I'm not criticizing that. I'm saying I don't think they knew how they got to the spot where they were.
Right.
And so just because those patterns were really sticking out, I said, hey, I would like to just show you, here's the pathway, and maybe you'll be able to trace your steps back.
It's good. It's a really powerful book. I love in particular, I think it was Van Gogh's Starry Night. That's a great section. Could you just, if you've never read the book, as somebody who's never read the book, talk a little bit just about that piece?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I actually had a painting of Van Gogh's Starry Night that I kept in my office for years. Since then, a girl who was in my youth group, who then was our youth pastor at Be Hope, has taken it, which I'm all for her taking it. So the story is this, is that Van Gogh's Starry Night is a painting. If you look at it, you would look at it clearly and you go, oh, it's pretty. And the eye becomes focused on the sun and the mountain. And then you start to realize that all of the small buildings in the painting have a light on, except the church. There's no light on in the church. And so you go back through Van Gogh's story and you realize before that he was a minister. And he gave away everything he had to the people of need in the community. And that one day he was visited by the bishop who was over him, saw him living a life in poverty, declared that he was living a lifestyle that was unfit for that of a minister, and stripped him of his credentials. And Van Gogh came to the spot where he just said, so it reflected his beliefs on the church, is to go, there's lights on everywhere, but there's no light on in the church. Wow. And so I just really believe, and I want to confess that I have not fully lived this out perfectly, but to acknowledge that I believe that the role of the pastor is similar to the role of a doctor, which is to go, first, do no harm.
Yeah.
Whatever you can do, do no harm. There's a lot of good you can do. But I acknowledge in my position that if I abuse the authority that has been given to me, I have the potential to be far more destructive to people's faith than I do have to be encouraging and influential in a positive way. And I think the thing within this, if I could just say that honestly just breaks my heart, is I know there are people, because I know them, I know who they are, that tell stories of how I have negatively influenced their faith.
Yeah.
And I would say that is, some of it was because of immaturity on my end. I would just, if I could just be fully honest, I would say most of it is because of immaturity on their end.
Sure.
Just to be blunt. But at the end of the day, the fact that they point back to me and my ministry and they go, that hurt my faith, man, that stinks. Yeah. And that just gives me caution to go as I'm navigating forward. And my tendency is to take on too much, too fast, too soon, and to run too fast, is to go, no, run at a pace that you can keep people with you, that you're encouraging your faith. Man, I listened like a lot of people did to the Rise and Fall of Mars Hill podcast.
Wow. Yeah.
And the part that I was just horrified by was just that singular statement of Mars Hill will leave a wake of bodies behind the bus.
Yeah.
And to say, I will celebrate baptisms. I will celebrate salvations. I will celebrate people getting connected to their calling. I want those numbers to be high. And I know those numbers because they matter. Yeah. But I also know the number of bodies that were left behind my ministry. And I need to keep that number as low as I possibly can.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, that podcast is yeah. It's hard. I call friends afterwards and I'm like, I need to take a breather. That's just rough.
Yeah, it was.
And because there's things we've all seen, tendencies within ourselves, right? That if we're not careful, a lot of things that happen there can just rise to that level. So lastly, as we kind of conclude this, talk to me a little bit about leading at home and your family. You've got 4 kids. I've got 4 kids as well.
Oh, awesome.
So, Yep. You're smart and you shave. I show all the gray.
Oh, no. I've got nothing here. I could go a week without shaving and it looked just about like this.
There you go. All right. So talk to me about your family, leading at home, the importance of relationships at home, and how that helps you lead better.
Yeah. So I always have to just run the caution to go, I'm highly participative as a leader, but at the end of the day, I have a team that's paid. And so push comes to shove and I walk in and I say, hey, we need to do this. They go and do it. That doesn't work in my house. And so it's easy for me in church to come in and to say, hey, this is wrong. This needs fixed. Let's do this differently. And people are responsive. And I've got to make sure I change my posture. I still want to serve the people that I lead in our church, on our team, in our staff. But I need to understand that I need to serve in a different way when I head home. And so, leading at home, I don't fully abandon my gift set, to say it like that. I create systems, I create process, I create clarity on what our kids are going to be rewarded by. We have a weekly calendar that I created on a spreadsheet that fills in the different days, that acknowledges we have behavior tallies and we have books. And I know this is ridiculous. My kids have a reward at the end of the week. They get the reward if their number of books that they have read exceeds their behavior tallies. And I have people to go like, why don't you just keep the behavior tallies low? As I say, no, I want to make sure that they're putting more positive influence in their life than just negative behaviors that are taking place. So to say, like, I keep my system, strategy, gift mix as part of the equation for how I lead our family. I am not a workaholic. I love my job and I could talk about church forever. But at the end of the day, I value being with my kids, being with my family more. I don't have problems putting my phone down. I don't have issues unplugging. I know a lot of people do, so I don't really have there was a study I read years ago, and this kind of keeps me in check when I'm in a bad spot. So my kids are 5, 7, 9, and 11. Mm-hmm. And it was talking through rehabilitating parents who had abused their children. Mm. And that one of the key things that they do is they create structured times for parents to just play with their kids. And it said, it is easy for parents to forget when they look at all their kids' problems that their kids are people, not projects. And that play is the thing that reorients them to the enjoyment of the relationship. And so I would say, like, as the father, I'm responsible for that. I am responsible for the fact that we're not just getting stuff done and we're developing enough, but that we actually enjoy our time together. And so I'm pretty adamant. Like, we down in Florida, this has been a beautiful thing. We have a pool.
Oh, yeah.
My kids have been in the pool every single day since we moved here.
Yeah. Best activity ever.
Yeah. If it's over 80 degrees, I'm in it with them. If not, I'm throwing footballs from the side, but I'm still engaged and involved. And so I just kind of always keep a pulse to go, hey, where are we at behaviorally? Are we spending enough time playing and enjoying together, doing that? My wife and I, we don't have like a super structured date night. I know some couples are like every this, every that. I don't know, maybe we should. We just kind of love to be together.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're always finding time, whether it's lunch, coffee. She works a job that gives her a great amount of flexibility. So she's in and out of the church offices all the time. And so to say our lack of structure is counteracted by the value that we just really enjoy spending time together. And so we're doing that constantly. So that's kind of what it looks like for me as a whole, leading at home.
That's awesome. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for your time. It has meant a lot. I hope this is a blessing to those who listen. Thank you for your ability to just tell your story well and to lead well. I appreciate all that you do. Again, although we're 1,200 miles apart, you feel like a brother. So blessings to you and all that you do.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It's been a blast.
Thanks for checking out this podcast. I hope this interview was a blessing to you. Like, share, subscribe, and get the word out, and let's indeed follow Jesus everywhere.